therefore, I'll ask you a question. When you encountered this in the Maimah, would you have explained it that same way?
If I say it again, I didn't hear that.
When we said in the Maimah these words,
Yeah.
Shogankim B'chinas Olam, would you have been able to explain it?
I see what you're saying. To use this expression for that Inyan. This is new.
Right.
Okay. And what is the significance that the Rebbe is choosing now to use that new expression?
That you're going a little too far.
Okay. Right. Stepping back.
All right, no.
Recording.
All right, so we will actually start right after that parentheses on page Tezayin, and it is 6 lines from the bottom. 7 lines from the bottom. The line begins with the word be-atziluz, and at the very end of that line there is a close parenthesis, and this is where we start. And the point that the Rebbe is explaining right now is that there are two principles, two categories in a bitul. We say that the recipient is bottled to his provider. There's the way it is in Atzilus. Atzilus is a recipient from Ayin Sof, and the way it is in Biya, which is a recipient from Atzilus. To explain that there is a categorical difference between these two bitul. And in Biya from Atzilus, although Biya is totally dependent on the hashpah that comes from Atzilus, nonetheless, the bitul from Biya is not total. Meaning to say that Biya actually, in a certain sense, pre-existed the hashpah that comes from Atzilus. Because everything that Atzilus mashvir to Biya existed first in Atzilus. V'im kain, at the end of that line, v'im kain, and therefore, bitul shalahem. The bitul, if Biya Atzilus should cease to mashpir and Biya, should cease to express itself on the level of Biya, and Biya would cease to be, this would not mean a categorical absence. The bitul would be rak sheyiya b'madrego eliyah yesir. It's only then that Biya would then cease to be Biya, the level of Biya. But the inyanim of Biya would not cease to be. They would all be on a higher madrega, the way they're in Atzilus. Avaloi bitul legamri mekol v'kol. There will not be a total bitul altogether, a total, an absolute bitul. Masha'enkin oilam ha'elyon, whereas oilam ha'elyon, I mean, not the word ha'elyon means the highest level, world. The very first point of world, which is Atzilus. Ein lo shayach loimar, there it is not appropriate to say shuhu kolu be'oyin soibor, that this highest world is kolul, is incorporated in oyin soibor. Sheharei, since that oyin soiv lav mikol ili midis klal. Oyin soiv is not of that category to be relating to any of these qualities or midos of Atzilus. Therefore, if the hashpah from the Ein Sof would cease to come, hoyo misbatel legamri, so then Atzilus would be misbatel, would be nullified totally, v'hoyo klei hoyo, and then it will be like it was never there. Bezehu, and this is the meaning of the word that we say, Shoha'elam ho'elyoin, ein aroich legamri, at the highest world, ein aroich legamri, it is in such a state that it, relative to its source, is ein aroich legamri, it's totally out of proximity. There is absolutely no commonality that can be correlated between AyinBase and Ein Sof. Yoiser, more mishein aroich olam hatachten, more than this outer proximity, this distance of the lower worlds, legabe olam ha'elyoin, relative to the highest world. Although the highest world is not just it is higher, but this is the source for the Ilma Tachten. This is what provides for the Ilma Tachten existence. And if that provision would cease, then the Ilma Tachten would cease to be. And yet we say that this is not a categorical out of reach. That there is absolutely no way that Olam HaTachton can find itself in Olam HaAtzilus, in a higher world. Olam HaAtzilus cannot find itself in Ein Sof. But Olam HaTachton is also infinitely lower than Atzilus, but it's not in categorical sense that they cannot be identified at all in Olam HaAtzilus. Okay, just to get us into this topic here, we explained the last time we learned this that there is a critical element in the principle of initiation. It means what starts it off. As we said the other time, to keep something running requires much less force than to initiate it. And the similar Ayin is in the Atzilus, in Ein Sof and Atzilus. In Ein Sof there is not any similarity to world. Therefore, to initiate the whole principle of world is a truly Ein Sof. It's an infinite type of a transition. Whereas Olam HaAtzilus versus the lower worlds, there is a principle for initiation, and the principle is that this which is contained in Olam HaAtzilus should come to expression in a revealed manner, in a full development. So we are talking about Olam HaAtzilus, we are talking about Biya, to bring it down to the realm that we can relate to. This is the union of Chokhmah versus all other faculties, Bina and so forth, as opposed to Chokhmah itself coming from the infinity of the nefesh. So this is just a brief reminder to what we have discussed in the past in this context. The same is in the more distant motion. However, it is an accurate thing. Sight versus all other faculties. So, we pointed out, the halacha says that you cannot enjoy your food unless you see it, even though you taste it, you hold it in your hand. And yet, this is not the same as seeing it. In other words, sight substantiates the reality of the food that you're eating, much more than the taste of it and the touch of it. And yet, sight only substantiates it. Sight does not create it from non-existence. So that the concept of food and so forth exists in this sight, except it exists in a much more refined manner, level. And therefore, if one does not see the food does not cease to be. Because in essence, it is there in concept. This is all Mushalim on this Inyan. That they've said, Ein Aroich, there is the Inyan from Ayin Soif, and then there is everything else. Ayin Soif is a different concept. This is what's called Atzilus.
Why does he use the term Oira and Sob, not Atzilus?
That will have to leave for another time. I mentioned the other day. Sooner or later, the principle that we have to understand. Oir Ein Sof means that whatever comes from it on the basis of its infinity. In other words, there's an infinite reason for this creation, not a finite and identifiable reason. In the whole Seder Atzilus, even from Chokhmah into Bina, also there is a correlationship. So therefore, the cause for it coming forth is not an infinite gap. Truly, Chokhmah and versus Bina is truly be-atziluz. I like sight versus touch. But it's not an infinite gap. Whereas Ayin Soif, this is a totally novel thing, 100% novel.
in this muscle of the food, if we would not see it, how are we to relate that to the nimshal?
If you don't see it, is that what you're asking?
Like we said, it would still exist in potential.
Right, that's what we're saying. We're saying that in Atzilus or in Chochmah, everything that eventually manifests, surfaces, has existed in the initial concept.
Existed in the initial concept. If it's
I believe that, Ashmo. I can't do that. Okay, 2 lines from the bottom. Pirush ein aroich. Pirush ein aroich. What is the meaning of the word ein aroich? Ein aroich means you cannot approximate, you cannot correlate. The inyan ho'erech hu, because the principle of erech, of correlation, of measuring proximity, hu echod legabe alofi. It's like you're comparing one relative to thousands. As it says in Tanya, that if you compare one to thousands, so it is much, much greater. But it's there is an erech, there is a means to correlate it. And what is the means to correlate? Now this one is a chelek, is a part of the huge accumulation. Except only that it is a small part. But despite the fact that it's a very small part, almost infinitesimal, nevertheless, there's a similarity, there's a correlation between them. So this is the principle of erech. One drop of water, one drop from the ocean, relative to the entire ocean, is insignificant totally. But it is a similar thing. The ocean consists of a huge number of these droplets. That's what it consists of. It's not a different presence, a different entity. It's the same entity, but in a greater number. And this is erech. Or beruchnius, this in ruchnius, hu inyan ilo ve'olo. Okay, in ruchnius this is much more subtle. It's the principle of ilo ve'olo. Sheha'olu kolu bi'elosei. Ilo ve'olo means cause and effect. Cause and the result of that cause. Olo. But we need to try to understand is the similarity of ilu ve'olu, the way it is begashmius, of one against a thousands. Take a drop of water. A drop of water is a godly creation. And as such, it has a full presence, meaning to say it's not just water is there, but it has a functional purpose. What is the meaning of water being in the world? Now, the ultimate meaning of water being in the world, even though practically speaking it's conceivable that one will take one drop of water, but this one drop of water is not the full-fledged accomplishment effect of water. The effect of water being in the world comes through only if we have thousands of drops. Then it has a significance in its presence. This is why we have this comparison, this proximity of a drop against a thousands. Sure, a thousands is much big, but what is the relationship between them? They're two separate entities. The answer is they're not two separate entities, because the ultimate meaning of anything that exists is not the little space that it occupies. It is its place in the entire creation. The place that water occupies in the entire creation is identified not by drop of water, identified by there being water. In all the ramifications, in all the quantities and the means by which it is there, there's water flowing under the ground, water filling the oceans and the rivers and the lakes and so forth. This is all the creation of water. And all of these together form the full impact of water being in the world. But then there is a drop of water. A drop of water is also part of that impact. Like we said many times. If you want to identify drinking water, not just water for other, in a broader sense. Drinking water is identified by a certain number of drops in a cup of water. Totally out, separated from its source, which is the lake and the ocean and so forth, and it's in a cup presented to the human being in a manner that human being can partake of it. So that this drop carries on the general significance of water in the world, but in a very limited fashion. Just in a very focused function what it is. Like we said the other day, what is the union from oil and keli? When you put water in a cup, the water is now no longer water in general in the world, but it is, you've identified in the world a certain function. and that is the function of drinking water. But water is not limited to drinking. There are other functions of water, in much greater and broader sense. But you've identified that particular function. And that particular function is a derivative of the overall meaning of water. So, this is the way it is begashmis. And if we understand this begashmis, we will be able to understand how this is beruchnis. Ruchnis is called Ila v'Olam. Ila v'Olam means the cause, the initiator. Olul means that which comes as a result.
The water mashal was the way that cause and effect, the drop and the body of water relate, cause and effect is related. And what's on Nimshal there? What was the...
No, I went into that in order to understand further. We're going to come into Ila v'Olam. Over there, it's much more subtle than in the case of water. That's why I went into this, and this way we'll be able to try to understand the principle of Ila v'Olam, of cause and effect. Olul means that which develops from the Ila, from the initial cause. So, it starts off by saying that in case of Ila v'Olul, Ha'olul kolul bi'atzilus, the Olul, the effect, the further development is included initially bi'atzilus in its Ila, in its initial cause.
Saying that the drop and the body of water are like the same material. They qualitatively...
Well, in the Gashmias, it's the same material, but as I pointed out, we have to recognize in Gashmias itself that it's not the material that is the presence. It is what its place in the general existence. And the same, from this we can come and understand how this beruchnis. So
intention, purpose, goal of what? You say with water we could drink, or we could swim in water, or we could fish.
Or we can water the ground.
We could water the ground.
And feed our plants.
This is the relation. This is the common denominator of bountiness of a certain thing in creation. As far as water, as an example.
Well, what I explained is...
From the question that Yona asked you,
tell me what the question
what's
is.
What's the relation to... what was the question? What was the question?
Okay, what's the question?
How does it fit to... How does it fit to the nimshal? Something like that. How does the water, what you're explaining about water, how does it fit to the nimshal? Of the correlation between the worlds or something like that. With the word of Atzilus and the word of Biya and something like that. Is that what we...
He was not asking a question. What did you ask?
My stepson was asking.
You asked a question. You asked Robert can feel a question.
We just said... Yeah, we just looked at what we had this mashal of water, and then then we just went over how it relates. Why did we get into that? The drop of water and then the whole body of water, the whole effect. So I said, what are we looking at with this? So Rabbi clarified.
All right. So as I said, beruchnius, in anticipation of trying to understand ilu ve'olu, I pointed out in the drops of water, there is similarity. It's not just quantitative, but there is an actual development from thousands of drops into a single. There's an element in the single drop that carries on the significance of the thousands of drops.
Like a miniature version in a way.
In a certain, yeah, and much reduced version, right. And very, very confined, but nevertheless, it's of a similar. It was contained earlier in the thousands, in a much higher and broader sense. So similarly in ilu ve'olu, sheha'olu kol bi'atzilus. There are many misholim, there are many aspects that go into the general realm of ilu ve'olu. But since we're first getting into this, I would like to focus in on the motion, on the illustration that we already pointed out. It's an interesting phenomenon that sight, as we mentioned many times, sight is not a category, in Begashmi it's the category of Chokhmah. Just as Chokhmah is the source for all comprehension, all knowledge that follows in a person, knowledge and even emotion, everything that follows begins from Chokhmah. Chokhmah is the initial provider of chayas in the human being. Everything else comes from Chokhmah. So the similar inyan is in sight versus that which is the derivative of sight. And we may not be aware of it, not pay attention to this, but this is the reality. As the halacha says, you can eat your food, but you don't see it, you have not really related to the food.
I was thinking of the horrifying situation of blindfolding someone and feeding him with his eyes closed. It must be.
It would be horrifying, right? It's an interesting thing. The halacha says you have to put on candles on Shabbos table. Why? Because Shabbos is supposed to enjoy your food. So now we have electric lights and so forth, but nevertheless, this halacha means that you have to have candles that to symbolically signify that light is a primary inyan that you need, that is necessary on the table. Why? Because you're going to be eating. What does eating have to do with seeing the food? Eating is a function of the palate and the chewing process and the digestive process and the stomach. What does that have to do with sight? In simple terms, it means, okay, see if you can, eating something that is not real is not a human enjoyment. And for it to be real, you have to see it. Just like Chokhmah provides a sense of reality to everything else that follows. So too sight provides a sense of reality to everything, to every other experience a human being has. I'm not going to go into the meaning of the word reality. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sure everybody has a certain sense of what we mean, because we discussed it in the past, and everybody knows what means real. To go into this now, it will be distracting. But this is what it is, and reality is the source of everything else. That can develop from. So, ilu ve'olu is this type of concept. This is a Ruchnisiyah concept, where there is this inyan at the level of ilu, of the cause, at the level of the conceptual level, and then he develops into a practical, a limited, finite presence.
Okay. And did we get into this because we're looking at Olam Atzilus and its relationship to Biya, in contrast to Biya and its relationship to Etzim?
No, Atzilus in relation to Atzilus.
Yes, it's different from this process, or this that we're talking about, which is Atzilus to Biya.
Right. Yeah.
But it sounds like we're saying that Atzilus,
without Atzilus, you would still have the potential. So it sounds like we're saying there's an error between Atzilus and Ayin as well.
No.
Just like Biya and Atzilus.
No. Exactly what we're saying is not true.
Right. It sounds like we said if we don't have sight, it would still be the potential. And we're comparing Atzilus to sight.
No, there's nothing there. What potential is there?
That sort of negates certain, like take for instance an artist that's blind. I know of a piano player that's blind, but he's an amazing piano player. So he doesn't see, but still his soul sees. The neshama itself sees, even without the body, without eyes. The neshama sees.
Piano keys are not the key to the sound.
The piano keys are not the keys to the sound.
Right. This is not what creates the sound.
What does?
All right, let's continue. So, Beruchim is in and Nullified. One second. Let's stop it.
Hello?
Oh, yes, Bonnie.
Hello?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is worthwhile. Maybe it's just my shtick. Is it, we have this concept of cause and effect in the world, in the Welt. This seems to have nothing to do with that conception.
Now, why don't we give us a chance to get into that and see what goes into that general category, and then we will see how this fits in.
Okay, I have another question also that goes back, but just to clarify. So, in terms of the Ein HaReich between Ayin Seif and everything else, including Atzilus, we say that Chochmah is Atzilus at a lower level. This is what we did. So, is the neshama the nimshal in that? I'm sorry, in the muscle of Chochmah. So, is it? We say that Chochmah is completely Ein HaReich, incomparable to the nefesh itself, to the neshama itself. That's the neshama.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's continue. Baruch is in Eleviyot. She'ha'olu kolu biyolosei, that just as in Gashmis, the one drop is contained in the 1,000. Similarly, the olu, the effect, that which results from the cause, Kol be-atziluz, whatever it results, it was initially contained in that which brought it out. V'hu kichelek chotem mimem. And this olul is like a small part of the ilo of the course. Kichelek chotem mimem is like a small part of it.
What is the small part of the course?
The olul, the resultant effect, is like a small part of the course from which it comes. This is using the same terminology as you said, one against a thousand, or thousands. Okay, there's much here. We'll try to give us a so to speak an introduction, a preparation by identifying the similar in one in a thousand. Because in one in a thousand, we naturally, by our perception, would not see any cause and effect. We would not see any similarity to what follows. That's why I start to point out, no, there is a similarity. Except the one relative to 1,000 is just a contracted element of the 1,000. But it is a similarity in its reason for existence.
We would not see it because of its smallness?
No, we don't see it because we don't see the whole relationship on an intellectual and on a physical level. We don't see the similarity between 1 and 1,000. See, it comes from there. It doesn't come from there. You took it from there. There are 1,000, now you took 1 out of 1,000. So there is no real cause and effect process involved. In cause and effect, all in all, there's a process. This is the cause and this is the result. It starts off at the elo level.
This is the distinction between many and one and cause and effect. Cause and effect giving us the ruchnius mashal, whereas the number, the count, would not give us this sense.
The numbers on their own would not give it. That's why I went into pointing out that there is a certain aspect of that also in the numbers.
Such as with the body of water.
Such as the body of water. Rak, okay, in the parentheses, except, give us a chance to go through this a little bit. Rak, except, the difference is only that when you have a drop from 1,000 or thousands, when you take a drop out of the 1,000, you have reduced the thousands by 1 drop. Whereas in this case of Ilo v'Olu, when you take the Olu from the Ilo, the Olu was caused by the Ilo, that does not take anything away from the Ilo. Ein choser bo Ilo klum. We shall see. As I said, let's go into this a little. the lower madrege of the ilo. Ilo means again the upper part, the cause, mislabeshes beho'olu, is actually imbued, imbues itself into the olu to bring about the development of the olu.
So we're saying that when we take 1 from 1,000, it doesn't affect the 1,000.
No, in 1 1,000 it does. The one will reduce 1,000 by 1.
Okay.
That's the way it is in Gashmis. But the similar thing in Ruchnius it's very similar, but over there's this difference that that there will be that he's not reducing the ila by bringing about the cause for the olam.
Okay, that's where Ruchnius and Gashmis is different.
It's different.
Is there a Gashmis marshal in the lighting a candle from one candle?
Maybe. I was thinking about that. I don't want to confuse the issue.
Yeah.
Ukmoi, as for in the case, the seichel umidois umachshava dibrumas. As in the case of seichel, midois, and machshava dibrumas. And then we have, in parentheses, another challenge. All right, let's just try and understand. Seichel midas machshava dibrumas. Again, we are challenged bichlal in our world to understand this principle that seichel is the cause for midas, and midas are the cause for machshava dibrumas. The reason that this is a challenge to us is that in the world that we live in, as a matter of fact, we are relating to midas before seichel. In terms that there's the real seichel, there's seichel, the real intelligent, the human seichel. But then there is a seichel as being a subservient to midas. For instance, I like something, and the reason I like something is because I like it. And now I'm going to use my seichel to try to obtain it. How do I get this? This seichel is the opposite. This seichel is not the cause for the midas. It is being directed and forced by the midas. But in reality, in the human being, seichel and midas and machshava dibur maisa, these are 3 stages in the reality of the human being. On the human level. What does it mean on the human level? It's so hot. Maybe we should put
I think we should open up this. There's a little bit of air conditioning there. I opened up these windows.
We could trigger the
This air
air
conditioning.
conditioner.
Okay, what you want to?
No, that's not. Okay, don't forget it. We almost finished. Seichel midas machshava dibur maisa. Again, I'm going to use a mashal that we've used in the past, and to get a real sense of what this is about. In our physical world, we have objects, we have stones. Just stone that has no particular function as identified in terms of human use. And the way we relate to anything that does come out, that we use the stone for, we say first we have the stone, that is the primary existence of this object. And then we took the stone and made a form out of it. But, as we said many times, a table, for example, it consists of wood, but that's not what the table is. The table is the concept of table as it exists in human intellect. And this is what we have to focus on and recognize as a reality. When you come into this room and you see a table, you say, I see the table because it's made of wood. Not correct. This is mitzad the guf, mitzad the nefesh habamis, but the intelligence says, no, I see the table because it's a table. Otherwise, I would completely ignore it, I would not see it at all. And its place in my mind, its place in the room is only due to its ruchnisdige significance. So, coming from this, recognizing this principle.
In other words, if we wouldn't have the concept of a table in our mind, we wouldn't see the table.
That's right. We as human beings would not see the table. Just as if you walk in the street and you see pebbles running around, you don't call attention to it. Or calls attention that which has a human significance is in your seichel.
That's if seichel was the originator of human life.
Of human consciousness, which is, except we're not conscious of it. But this is exactly what a human being is. And I want to demonstrate it to you. As we mentioned many times, a house consists of 4 walls and a ceiling. But when we encounter a house, Baruch Hashem, this much intelligence we have, we immediately say, no, this is a house. This is not 4 walls. The dog will say this is 4 walls. To us, this is not 4 walls. This is a house. It's one entity of reality of a house. This seichel, that this is a house, this brings out a midos element. What is a house about? Oh, I can relate to it. I would feel much more comfortable living in a house than living in the street. This is the midas element of it. Which is caused by the seichel. In other words, I said many times, if the concept of a house to a human being were only the fact that this protects him against the elements, protects him against the robbers, he can close the door and no intruders will come. Then there is not really a seichel that you concept of it. It's only a derivative of a circumstance. Since there are a lot of wind, a lot of rain, a lot of robbers, so I close the door and don't let him in. It does not come from seichel.
And even though it did not come from seichel, midos could relate to that.
No, on the contrary, there's a midas that bring about because I wanted my security. This is the midas element. But what is the reality? The reality is, as you said, Odom Shein Lebayis Ein Odom. The whole concept of a house is actually rooted in his being a human being. This is the root of it. This is a reality itself. A house is a concept that this is what encompasses a human being and gives a human being, like we said last night, his turf, his place in the world.
The feeling of a human being.
Huh?
It gives him the feeling.
That's right,
of
the
a
feeling of a
human
human being. What defines a human being. He has a real presence. From that comes the yonim of midas. But initially, this is seichel in it. From this seichel comes midas, and from the midas, eventually will come four walls. How do you actualize a house in the physical world? Oh, you actualize it by making four walls and a ceiling. This is much further down. But
what's the midas element here?
The midas element is the comfort, the self, the comfort that it gives you, the calm.
That it will give you, because
Huh?
you don't have the house now. It's just
No, that's in the concept. That this is, yes, I want it, and therefore. One second. So in this structure, actually on the final stage, one recognizes that in order to have a house and to accommodate the midas that he wants to build a house from scratch. He has to put up four walls and a ceiling. And here is the point that the Rabbi is making. That when you are involved in putting on these four walls, are you putting up walls or are you building a house?
Building a house.
But your hands, don't relate to a house. House is a seichel concept. Your hands don't know what the house is. So we are saying that the hands also, I said the other day, the hands are inspired by the total concept. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the spirit to pick up your hands and start building. So that the spirit that's contained in the seichel and then in the midas is reflected in machshava dibur ma'aseh. This is what gives life to machshava dibur ma'aseh. It's an interesting thing that we mentioned many times when it says that the Mitzrayim in Mitzrayim, the Egyptians tortured the Eden. How they are tortured? They made them work beforach. And what does beforach mean? Beforach means work in a manner that disrupts the whole human structure, human self-respect. How did they do that? They told them, dig a ditch. Presumably, I'm digging a ditch in order to put a pole into it, so that the digging it will have some kind of a human value. But then he turns around and says, "Okay, now put all the earth back," and that's beforach, which means there is not a trickle down from the seichel and midas into the action. But normally, Yila ve'ol, seichel and midas. Seichel reflected in the midas, and the midas are reflected in Machshava Dibur U'Mais.
Machshava doesn't relate to the cycle, just to the midas.
Machshava relates to everything. Everything is reflected in Machshava. Seichel is Machshava and midas and mind. But we're talking about right after the koyach HaMachshava, that which gives the ability to act, to the koyach HaMachshava. This is created. There's two different things. In other words, in Machshava we realize the Seichel. Machshava is essentially Seichel at the physical level. So this is a separate thing, and hopefully we'll get into this.
And Ratzon and Oneg.
Well, leave that out.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
One of the tests psychologists use to see if you're sane, to test the sanity of a person, is called house, tree, person. You're supposed to draw a house, a tree, and a person. And how the person draws those things is a factor in showing their sanity or not. So it's interesting that you use a house as a example, as an example of.
It's checking out their sanity, I understand.
So, what I'd like to touch upon just a little bit. Madrei at the end of the top line at that. Madreya tachtena shebiyilo mislabeshes beholo. The lower madreya in the ilo, this is what mislabesh in the ilo. So using the moshel that we said, if we say of a house, of a home, modem shein Beis in the ilo. In the conceptual level, in the intellectual level, a home provides a person with, we could say, a measure of self-respect, which means it provides him with the sense that he really belongs here in the world. He is not an intruder. He really belongs here. He has a real place here. This is the, so to speak, the initial inyan. Odem shein lebayis ein yom. I have given the motion for this on a lower, on a simplest level, that if you attend a wedding and you're enjoying everything that's going on in the wedding, you feel totally differently if you're an invited guest or you're uninvited guest. It's the same music and same food. But if you're not inviting, there's a human element missing. If you're invited, you have a completely different sense. This is the symbol. This is in Odem Shel Bias in the Odem. When he has a bias, he senses his reality in the world. Now, this is at the highest level. This is a need for self-respect, which is the initial truth. But then also, this house provides not just a place in the world, but provides a certain comfort, convenience, which is a derivative of that initial truth. This is the lower madriga of the initial truth.
Saying that it works on this functional level is a derivative from the more central level.
Yes.
What?
In other
Wouldn't,
Because the
I mean,
neshama-
it kind of confuses the issue a little bit, because like we said, you could get it back to front. The guy gets protection from the elements, so you could think...
No, and that's exactly what we're saying. From the highest level, the lowest level, the higher of the seichel is mislavish in the midas.
Okay, so in the mashal of the house, the essence is
The
touching
essence
the
includes
house,
everything.
and the house touches the practical levels below it.
Yeah, it includes everything,
Uh-huh.
Including the sense of security.
including the sense of security. That's all included in the initial reality of a house. But then within that itself, there is the higher level, the higher element, and the lower element.
Higher would be the comfort, and the lower.
The higher would be,
security.
like I said, the self-respect.
What about the neshama belongs to Hashem? So it's
There's no
belongingness.
question about that.
So the house.
No disagreement.
So the house, that's the higher, and the lower is the sense of belongingness, security, belongingness, and so isn't that the part? Isn't it the highest that the shama is belongs to Hashem? It's a part. Categorically, mal mamash. What?
Please stick to the point.
Why is it not sticking to?
Because I'm trying to explain seichel and midas.
But you said that Adam that has no bayit is not an Adam. And so what's the reason that we have a house? So I'm saying that a house gives a person a sense of belongingness and security, and you said convenience and comfort, and so what's
that's the lower part of
what's
the house.
That's the lower. But what's the higher?
The higher part of it makes him a human being.
We have a
No, come on, you can fly away with anything you want.
Okay.
Makes him a human being. The difference between a human being and an animal, the human being has a function to be here, and the element does not. Animal is only concerned about security and about food. I'm trying to keep us focused. There is no question there's much more everywhere. You talk about a drop of water, and there's an ocean. Let's talk about the ocean.
Makes sense.
All right. So this is what he says, that in Ilo v'Yolo, also in the Ruchnis, is also the same thing. Madrega tachtena shebe'ilo mislabeshes beholo. The law madrega in the Ilo is mislabeshes beholo. So the point which I'd like that we should understand, at least just to mention for briefly, that yes, indeed, there is security and there is convenience. Like I said many times, a human being doesn't have to hold a cup in his hand; he has a place to put it down. Now, this convenience of putting it down, yes, it is convenient, but included in this convenience is the overall sense that this is the right way that a human being should function. It's a human element. So this is also a derivative of the ultimate human element that he belongs here. Since he belongs here, then everything has to be suited to his comfort, to his function. Okay, this is it for this morning.
This last piece is in the union of cause and effect?
Right. Pointing out, yes, not to realize that when you go from the Seichel, Mashal Dibra Maisa, and you have not lost contact to the Seichel. Because if you lose contact with the Seichel, that's no longer the same thing.
Paltiel,
yes.
Why does he belong there?
Because the human being was created by God.
And the neshama knows that.
Human being was created by God to fulfill a certain purpose.
Right.
That's the essential presence of the world. He was created not like an animal created that's to roam around the world. He was created after everything was created. Then human being was created to control the world, to bring a human quality and order to the world. That's what the world is about. That's what the human being is about.
Not for himself, just to contribute. Is this
Yes,
the point?
that's what it says in the Torah, in the Posik. The human being doesn't need the world. He does not need the world. He's a neshama. He's completely outside of the world. He doesn't need the world.
No, I did not mean it that way. I meant that what's the sense, the highest thing that a person wants a home and feels comfortable at a home is because.
Please listen. Instead of following away, listen to what I'm saying to you. He has a home because he has a function. He has a purpose in life. His place in the world is to accomplish.
Mesiras nefesh.
Mesiras nefesh. Aye. Sorry.
Yeah.